Let's cut the bullshit. We've got straight up marketing advice. You should use it.
Just drop the jargon.
Adam+Simon's Bullshit Busters.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adam+Simon Bullshit Busters. I'm Simon Batchelor.
I'm Adam Bastock.
And this week we are talking all about how to reduce the environmental impact of your packaging. So if you're running an e-commerce business, or if you've got an in-person shop and you've got some packaging that you're using to ship out your goods, then this episode is for you. We're going to be talking about the environmental impact that packaging has and how you can go about reducing it. We know there's a lot of noise out there, and there's a lot of companies ideally trying to sell you a lot of this packaging. So we thought we would help explain some of the pros and cons and some of the considerations that you can make in order to make the right choice for not only your business, but also your environmental impact. So, Adam, do you want to start off, I guess, by explaining what are some of the environmental impacts of packaging just as a thing? Not necessarily environmentally friendly packaging, but just what are the sort of negative impacts of e-commerce packaging?
Yeah, I think the one is, as we saw during lockdown, really, everyone's homes started getting more and more full of cardboard, which actually ended up driving cardboard prices up at like a macro level, which was interesting because it wasn't entering the system again. But there is just a huge amount of packaging that's being shipped around all the time. And I think there's two real elements to it. One is a litter problem in terms of people, that the plastic used in packaging ending up in our environment in quite a obvious way and really damaging stuff. So from, fishing nets through to obviously not packaging those in e-commerce, I hope, through to, just plastic packaging generally. So that's one side of it. And then also is the carbon impact and the environmental impact from that side of things, where everything from cardboard to plastic to mushrooms to styrofoam, polystyrene. Yeah, thank you. I was struggling for some of those ones. They all have huge carbon impacts attached to them, and therefore, the more you're using, the more your impact's going to be in terms of your carbon footprint, which will become important if you are trying to reach net zero or trying to reduce your footprint down. So those are the two main issues, really. I think there is a litter problem and there is a carbon problem, and I think it's very important that we define those as two separate things for reasons we'll come on to later. And I think in e-commerce, there's two elements to it as well, in that you want to have a positive user experience in terms of packaging, which I'm actually going to grab out a shop in a minute, which I should have done before we started recording. But then also in terms of making sure your product arrives very nicely as well and has a positive user experience. So one moment for the grand reveal. I ordered some business cards recently it's actually from Canva, and I'm very pleased with this isn't sponsored by them, sadly, but if you are Canva and listening, please do throw all of your cash at our direction. So just got some business cards, which came in like a little box. So just obviously, that's the card inside of them.
Yeah.
But then that sits inside a completely cardboard little kind of presentation box. So there's no plastic at all, and it's all basically done through physics. And there's one bit of glue on it at the top, and it just came as a sealed, branded little box, which I really liked.
Very nice.
Just super tidy, super minimalist. All kind of comes down. It's got a little bit of imprinted messaging on the inside about their packaging and sustainability. So I think there's an element there of, one, it is entirely sustainable because it's all cardboard. It can quite easily be recycled domestically, very easily. You don't have to worry about specialist recycling. And secondly, as a brand experience, it was delightful. It was like, oh, this is really nice. This feels like a very special, luxurious thing to open.
And actually, in terms of cost to them, it's quite low. Once you've got past the R&D stage of trial and error of the packaging, that to repeat that packaging experience is really easy. So if you do have a fairly standardized size product that you're shipping, or you have sort of made to order stuff that is sort of often the same size, then obviously that is a very easy thing to do. Obviously, if you've got maybe a more challenging e-commerce setup whereby you have 5 or 6 different boxes and you're maybe assembling goods from different suppliers into packages of things, or people can order, a book, a mug, some business cards, and some trainers or whatever, and you've got all of that to then put in a box, then you've got a slightly different e-commerce packaging problem.
It's a different proposition, and I think one of the things I'm just looking at the box now. It's all black and white. So in terms of the ordering, that's reducing the cost down, and also in terms of the die cut, I've just noticed that. And if this isn't is terrible to the podcast, but you should be watching on YouTube. And if you are on the podcast version, then go check out our YouTube channel. In the actual box itself, it's got like perforated inserts that
Nice.
pop out. So if I did order a bigger object, you can use the same box, but just take that bit out. So I think
Nice.
there is this idea of just being clever about it and thinking about it. Now,
Yeah.
I think when it comes to packaging, there's a golden rule, which at Small 99 we always will bash on about, and I will always talk about, because it is the golden rule, which is reduce and don't replace. So
Yeah.
this experience from Canva is quite good because it's quite a minimal unboxing experience in terms of they needed something big enough to put a label on it. It's arrived. It's a good experience, and it's got everything I need in there. What annoys me, and what has annoyed me several times with some brands, I think Selfridges was the main one that did this, where I ordered a tiny little kind of tin of something. It was either chocolates or like pens or something that didn't need protecting that much. It was in a tin already. They could have chucked it in an envelope and that was it. Instead, they sent it to me in a cardboard box a bit bigger than that one, full of wrapping paper for something that was just basically slightly bigger than 2 credit cards, full of just tissue paper in a canvas bag with then more tissue paper around it. And it was just this complete kind of overconsumption, unnecessary thing where clearly someone at the warehouse was just pulling this off of a reel and just stuffing it in. And I think the idea of an SD card from Amazon is also a good one that you see a lot online, of this huge box with a tiny little thing in the middle of it. And because it's paper, that's somehow seen as being okay and not an issue. And this is where this reduce, don't replace thing comes into, because a few companies I've spoken to are like, well, we want to get rid of our plastic bags and therefore we're going to replace them all with paper or with canvas. And I'm like, immediately, you're kind of not getting this kind of correct. That's a very dangerous route to go down. And just to throw a stat out there, a kind of a Tesco's bag or a Waitrose bag, whatever you get in the supermarket, but it's just a plastic one, that produces around 10 grams of CO2 to produce that one bag. So quite not a lot, because obviously it's a very small item, but it's quite lightweight. So about 10 grams. A paper bag that is the equivalent size or like an equivalent strength. So I think like the Morrison's ones or something slightly bigger than that. This isn't Morrison's bag exactly, but a paper bag will have around 80 grams of CO2 in it. So 8 times the amount that a plastic bag does. And this is where it gets quite scary and dangerous, because you think you're doing something environmentally friendly, but you're actually increasing your carbon footprint by 8 times. Now that's quite a lot to suddenly be kind of a dangerous route to be pursuing. And it's this idea of, well, what's the right thing to do then? Because if plastic's bad and then paper's now bad, then what do we do? And the answer is just reduce the need for the bag entirely. That box that I ordered from Selfridges, that little tiny tin, didn't need to be in a box. It didn't need that packaging around it. Therefore, you could quite easily deliver that in a way that is safe and possible without doing that. And I think one brand that does get this really well is Rapa Nui, and I definitely check those guys out, because I ordered a bunch of clothes from them, and that came in a big paper bag and nothing else. There wasn't any wrapping in it. There wasn't any tissue paper. There's no fanfare. It was just my clothes that I had bought and nothing else. It's like, great. So I've got the thing that I wanted safely to my house. That's all I really want from them. It doesn't need to be this kind of grand experience. So that reduction
because if you think
element
about buying clothes in an old school shop, if anyone can remember those, they give you the clothes in a bag to take away. Now, if you got that paper bag and just stapled the top and wrapped it round with some tape and then put a label on it, the cost is the same in terms of packaging, and actually the deliverability of those clothes is still the same.
Exactly.
So I guess I think the key concept there is that reducing the amount of packaging or reducing the need to supply packaging is the key focus. And then wherever you can swap out, but only once you've reduced it down. So, for example, Canva have obviously decided that they can reduce the amount of packaging they need by having a box that fits most things and using inserts. So they've reduced the need to have 10 sizes of box by just having one box and using inserts. So that's a clever reduction, even though they are still using cardboard to do it. You know what I mean? Like the old school way of doing that would have been to have a shrink formed plastic insert. So they've just sort of updated that with some cardboard. I guess I can hear some people shouting at their monitors right now, and they're like, "But what if the delivery driver, Adam, they leave my clothes in the rain? What if it
Yeah.
gets wet on delivery? Then that paper bag is just going to rip and fall apart." So what do we do about that element of the delivery element of packaging?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I think the example I'll go, if your clothes get wet, they quite often get wet and they get washed anyway, so I wouldn't worry about that too much, just to pick up on that one example slightly. But yeah, I get the point. With the paper bag, and it is that you get that mushy packaging, and it's a horrible experience, and that is a difficult thing. And this is where you do have to look at your returns and be a little bit practical with it. And I think, I wouldn't necessarily use that, but I think like a mug or something delicate that you're shipping is a better example.
Yeah,
Where
electronics is another good example.
Yeah, well, yeah, because the carbon emissions embedded within the product that you're shipping is going to be quite large, especially with something like the electronic, like a motherboard or something like that you're sending out, is going to be quite very high, and therefore you want that from a carbon perspective. You want that to arrive in one piece and be used by the customer immediately. That doesn't need any other additional details to it. And also, there's an argument there of not an argument. There is the fact there, in terms of the logistics of getting it to you, has generated emissions as well. And therefore, if you're sending something to someone who then has to send it back to you, and then you're sending it back out again, that's immediately tripling the emissions of that item. So delivery is really important. And I think the important thing there is not to compromise on the quality or the safety of your product arriving with the customer to be used correctly. Again, these are business cards in kind of plastic. They don't need that much protection because they are just pieces of paper, and that, you know, even if that box got wet, the inner box would be fine. So they clearly thought about that as well. And I think it is just that thinking of the user experience there and going, well, in terms of that user journey, I didn't need a delivery slip for it because I didn't want to return them because it's something customer ordered. The box is minimal because it's got the insert and it's safely arrived as much as I need. And because of the way they designed the box, it was very securely packaged. It was very fixed. It was, not going to fall around and throw my business cards around the Royal Mail warehouse. Perhaps beneficial if it did. So I think that entire journey, that entire user experience is very positive. And that's where you kind of have to think about this packaging beyond just the getting it to someone. It's about getting it to someone safely. Because if I order a mug and it arrives broken, I'm then going to send it back to you, and then you're going to have to send out a new one. That's actually probably 4 times the emissions because it's always going. Plus then that the emissions embodied in that mug to produce it need to be redone because they need to create a new mug, right? So I think this is where you have to be quite careful with packaging. It's difficult, but I think it's a great opportunity as well for a positive user experience where, and even financially, I'm talking about carbon a lot, but you could basically take out the word carbon and put in money, right? And it's going to cost you more money to send that product back out. Using too much packaging is going to be really expensive. Using too much unnecessary kind of green packaging just sometimes got the premium, so that's going to be more money as well. So it's really about thinking about the entire experience here and going, what is the best experience someone can have in the least amount of kind of financial or material kind of input, and doing that. And that's where, again, going back to Rapineur's example, I think it really does work because the bags probably don't get wet that often because it probably isn't going to be left outside in the rain that much. And even if it does, the paper bag is going to get wet. It's going to probably leak into the clothes, but then you just wash the clothes and you're going to be all right.
I mean, that was a more of a pedantic, I was just being a pedantic example trying to do that objection handling from the client side. It's like, the same is true. Like I order from Beer 52 because I listened to a podcast once 5 years ago, and that box is like, that's heavy and breakable, but yet every time my beers turn up unbroken because the packaging is cardboard within cardboard within cardboard. And yet I don't have a thought of like, oh, well, if it's left outside, then it's going to get wet and all the bottles will fall out of it. But I think some people try and put the objection in straight away to be like, oh, we couldn't possibly do that because of this once in 1,000 order scenario. And I think this is where it's important to do this calculation, even if you're doing it roughly or guesstimating of like, okay, well, actually, if we were to move from the polystyrene insert to 4 cardboard wedges, what is the likelihood of damage there? What is going to happen? And maybe if you've got a returned product, that's knackered, you can put it in a box and try dropping it out of the back of a van and see what happens. You can do your own experiment, but make sure you film it and put it on your social media to show people that you're trying this stuff and you're doing stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So I think also another thing that links back to our previous episode is all about green hushing. So if you haven't watched the episode all about greenwashing, then the green hushing link will appear in the corner. Not sure which side yet, but it will appear in the corner. Go and check that out. But essentially, if you are doing stuff about your packaging and you have had a major win in the fact that you've managed to reduce your packaging down by 20%, then tell everybody about it. Make sure that on your new packaging, you tell everybody how much smaller and better it is from the environment than your old packaging. Yeah. Because as Adam has demonstrated here, opening up that box from Canva is a delightful experience, and then learning that it's a recyclable, it's efficient, it's got a low environmental impact, has just made that experience that much better. So,
and I've advertised it now.
And you've advertised it. So there we go. So I think there's a number of big brands that are trying this. When I bought my Dell laptop, it came in a really nice recycled cardboard box with recycled plastic. Inside, admittedly, another cardboard box, but it had cardboard corner wedges. There's no polystyrene in sight with that laptop. And the reason I knew it was all recycled is because it said so on the inside of the box. Yeah. So that I now use that as a great example of how Dell's packaging is better than Apple's packaging, because Apple's packaging is wrapped in plastic. Yeah. And then the cardboard is matte laminated with, you guessed it, plastic, which means it's not recyclable. So you've got this not recyclable box that everyone raves about as packaging, which is completely unrecyclable, versus something that's made from recycled plastic and consumer recovered fibers or whatever it was. There's all this stuff going on, and that's where your green hushing could be working against you if you've done all this hard work and then don't tell anybody about it.
And I think, especially from a conversion rate point of view, it's really good to have that on your website so that customers know what they're going to expect when they buy it as well, especially if they are concerned about plastic usage. And I think the thing that struck me with that Selfridges package that I bought, it was the canvas bag that really annoyed me, because that's got an even larger footprint than paper has, because the amount of water that's used to create the tote material stuff. So it's just like, if I'd known that, I probably wouldn't have bought it from them, or I'd have maybe found somewhere else, because it was a product that was just, they were the easiest to buy it from at the time. But if there was someone else who was offering it and I was like, okay, I can see the packaging it's going to arrive in, I know what to expect when it arrives, and it's going to come in this nice, just minimalist bag with no nonsense, and not have like 45 return slips, delivery slips, information on the terms and conditions of returns on a product that I don't actually want to bloody return, and I'm just going to have to throw it out. I don't want that as an experience. So,
but I think also we've kind of proved the point in the way we're talking about these different brands now. We're advocating for some, and we're pointing out others. So, for example, from the Selfridges point of view, actually, there might be a few people listening to this now who are looking at buying things and thinking, oh, do you know what? If actually that's what I'm going to be doing, I just won't use them. And eventually people will just start to be like, oh, this is crazy. I mean, the fact that you've had that negative experience from Selfridges means you're I would presume, probably highly unlikely to place another order with them unless you really can't get it anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was an item that wasn't particularly unique to them, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah. There's a word for that, but I can't remember what it is. It's commodity. Yeah.
But I think it's that thing, e-commerce, as they say, you're only as good as your last delivery. So, if you've had a wonderful experience on your last delivery, that's what people remember. So if you've made, a great effort to get that parcel to someone with your goods inside, and they have a great experience, you never know, they might make a podcast about it and put it up on YouTube and share it with lots of people. If it's that good an experience, people will show unboxing. That's why unboxing exists, because the experience is so good. So I guess maybe the aspiration is that someone tweets, makes a YouTube video, does an Instagram about how good your packaging now is, the improvements you've made, what a wonderful experience it was, and that recommendation goes a long way. And in the world of e-commerce, that will outperform, that outperforms ads, it outperforms emails, everything. If you can get that recommendation, it's great. So although we started this video with the environmental impact of your packaging, which is obviously very important. I think we've highlighted some other areas of your e-commerce business that you're going to see amazing gains in by simply, focusing on reducing that packaging, reusing when you can, and then remembering to tell everybody about it as well.
Well, I think that's it. If you can make your packaging a minimal kind of delightful experience, a minimalist delightful experience where you don't have too much excess packaging, it's been thought through, it's been it's thoughtful, you've thought about the materials, you've thought about the safety of the product. That is what's going to create a delightful experience, more so than just throwing more, shiny paper into it, which ultimately people are then going to go, so I've got to get rid of this now. And it just seems a bit of a waste of me receiving it. So I think it's the opportunity for that. And that kind of brand loyalty segment, I think it really is strong, because then people will tell their friends about it and do that. Just before I forget, in terms of the figures I quoted earlier around the reduce, don't replace, the 80 grams versus 10 grams, there's a great book called How Bad Are Bananas by Mike Berners-Lee, his brother. I always get them the wrong way around. Try and get the one that's got that kind of turquoise colour on it. That's the latest edition. It's just full of like little facts like that and puts a lot of different environmental aspects into a really good context. So would recommend that.
Excellent. We will put a link to that book in the show notes or in the description. So if you are running a e-commerce business and you're thinking about your packaging, and you found this episode useful, or it's really got you thinking about it, then do give us a follow or a like if you're watching on YouTube. If you know someone who runs an e-commerce business and you think they are thinking about this, they're struggling with it, they may be looking into all the different options right now, then we'd really love it if you could forward this episode to them so they can enjoy listening to us and hopefully learn something and get thinking about their packaging in a slightly different way. So do send this on if someone pops to mind. So thank you very much for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you soon.
Just drop the job.
Adam and Simon's Bullshit Busters.